Hey everyone, John here! And every now and then, we get comments saying, this dude sounds like he could be doing voice acting. Why isn't he a voice actor? And I hate to break it to them, but I am a voice actor. I got my break as the voice of the Philips One Blade. You can hear that on TV, on the internet, mostly in UK and Ireland, but you might hear it elsewhere, on Twitch as well. But I've been doing video games since then. I've done around 9. And I think the first one that released was Cat Quest 3. Not the first one I recorded, but the first one to hit store shelves, and I'm very proud to be part of that one. The demo for my most recent one, Demon Tides, is out right now. You can play that. I voiced the antagonist in that. But I don't tend to talk about this stuff very much on the channel, because I view my personal life and the GVG channel as two separate things. But I did something very recently that I want to talk about.
Did you see what they did to him?
Okay, they arrested.
Yeah. What the hell was that, Hauser?
The client didn't want to
Negotiate with terrorists or the dead. They were civilians. They weren't terrorists, and they certainly weren't the fucking dead! Look! We needed a distraction, and I gave one. You're sick.
So I went to Target 3D in London, which is a motion capture / performance capture stage. They basically have this big stage called the Volume. And for those who don't really know what motion capture is, you put on these Velcro suits, you put on little balls all over your body, and there's cameras just surrounding the stage, the Volume. And they are picking up every possible angle to make sure these balls are never obscured. So you can be rotating around, moving, rolling, and the cameras are always going to know exactly where those balls are. And using the data they've captured from those balls, they can put your motion data onto a 3D model, and all of a sudden, that 3D model is fully animated, doing whatever movements you did. That's motion capture. And then performance capture, it's taking motion capture, but also getting your expressions and your voice at the exact same time. And for that, you put on a big headset, which has a camera looming at the end, an unflattering angle, which is going to pick up all of your facial expressions and record your voice. And then that's all applied onto the model as well. So that's the difference between motion capture and performance capture. Performance capture is just another layer on top of motion capture. But this was like some of the most fun I've ever had acting, just ever. I love voice acting. I love that you can just become a different person. You can talk in a high voice or a low voice or an old voice. It doesn't matter. And I think what I love about motion capture and performance capture is it's an extension of that. Like, I don't have to be me. Some projects may scan your face in and basically you are you, but other times you can just become anybody. And I adore that. I love just the freedom to make a character and be them. It doesn't have to resemble you at all. It doesn't have to sound like you or move like you. You can just make your own person. And it's so fun to play that way. And I found that motion capture is a really interesting middle ground between film and theatre. So unlike theatre, you don't have to amplify and project everything. So in theatre, you've got to be really expressive with your movements so people far behind can read exactly what you're doing. And you've also got to project your voice so they can actually hear you. Whereas motion capture and performance capture is a lot more like film and TV, where like you can whisper, you can talk like this, and people can understand you because in post they can just amplify that and make it audible. So you get that sort of that more personal closeness with your voice that you can do the same way that you can do a voice acting. But it's also really similar to theatre in the way of the stage. So in theatre, you've got one stage, they can make multiple sets, but the stage is always the stage. That's the limiting factor. As an audience member, you've got to suspend your belief somewhat. Sometimes props, you just have to believe they are what they say they are. And in motion capture, that is the entirety of it. There are no sets. Everything is just a big white void. And the technical team behind it, they can make props. They can make a chair. Like if you're sitting down, they've got to find something that can be used to prop you up, whether that's a chair or a block or whatever. And that has to be mapped to the 3D world, basically one-to-one. If you're doing jumps, they've got to make, things that you can jump off. They've got to make stuff on the fly. It can be done in a very unpolished way, as long as it matches up and it's safe, then it can be done. But when you're actually just acting in a scene, you have to suspend everything. You've got to imagine that there's costumes. You've got to imagine the set. Where are the doors? Where are the windows? Sometimes you pretend like a metal frame is the door. It's really, really cool when you're in there. And you get that physical bounce-off body language that you don't get in voice acting. In voice acting, it's usually you on your own. And that's great for schedules, but in terms of actually being able to know how the other person is responding, you've got to rely on the voice director for that. Whereas here, you get that in real time. You can bounce straight off them, just like you could in TV and film. And so, when you think back to basically any modern video game, I think you should consider that the cutscene you're watching, or the movement you're watching, whatever's happening, the set piece, it is probably a real person doing that. So when you think of a cutscene, imagine that 3D model was just replaced with somebody else. And here's a few examples of that.
Let's see what you're really made of.
Ethan Winters.
Let's see what you're really made of.
Ethan Winters.
Is this really all they had to worry about? Boys, movies, deciding which shirt goes with which skirt. It's bizarre.
Get up. We're leaving. Come on.
And if I say no?
Do you even realize what your life means? Huh? Running off like that, putting yourself at risk? It's pretty goddamn stupid.
Well, I guess we're both disappointed with each other then.
What do you want from me?
Admit that you wanted to get rid of me the whole time!
And what's really fascinating about The Last of Us there is like Troy Baker does not resemble Joel at all. He's a blonde-haired man, and his normal voice is very different to Joel's voice, but he is able to embody a different character without his physical appearance limiting him in that regard. And it's a really powerful scene. Like, you don't think about him being Troy anymore. He just becomes Joel. And that's the magic of motion capture. And with films like Avatar, you can just make an entire species. Like, with performance capture and motion capture, you don't have to be just a man. You can become an alien or a monster. And one person who was there with me, I got to witness her become a monster. This is Beth. Her full name is Bethany Forrester. Here's her Instagram. You should hire her if you are casting for any monster work, because she is phenomenal. She is trained in stilts, and she was able to walk around in this tall, heavy movement while also still embodying the voice of a monster. And the results were fantastic. Keep into account, like, this wouldn't be how it looks like in a game. The animators would go in and refine some of it themselves, but what she managed to capture is still really polished and really impressive. She's a tremendous actor. And there's also Joe as well. Joe was a really great actor. His full name is Joe Stewart Paul, and this guy, he loved being in monkey mode. He bought these prosthetic arms he could use to lean on. You've probably seen them in Planet of the Apes behind the scenes. But he was very passionate about like following what those actors in those movies did. And the way he could move around, like, he could just go from being a human to being a monkey in a snap of a finger. Very, very cool stuff. Whereas I just like to do a forward roll every now and then while talking like a villain. But basically, the point is, you meet some very talented people doing this line of work, and there's definitely a distinction between stunt actor and performance actor. And that's also just a great part about motion capture and performance capture, is multiple people can be the same guy. That you can be the person who voices someone in their cutscenes, that you can walk around, you still have their movements, it's still you, but then when something has to happen, like a big jump, a big flip, or there's an explosion and you're just pushed to the side but you're not really trained for that, someone else can suddenly be that guy. You can share the character across multiple people. And I find Baldur's Gate incredibly interesting in that regard. So in that game, some of the motion capture artists would just fill in for other actors. Some of them only did voice, some of them did full performance capture. But the main party members all did performance capture. And it's so interesting, because when you go in for a voiceover job, a lot of the time it's just a script. It's just a script right in front of you, there's nothing to memorize. These guys, though, they have to perform every bit of dialogue. So they're put into their own little volume area. They probably have a script in front of them. I'm not entirely sure how that exactly works, but they are fully acting all the time. They're using their body, they're using their face, while also performing just a crazy amount of dialogue. I don't know quite how they did it, but they had fun doing it at least. But the volume of work they did there is unprecedented, and it shows in the game. So many RPGs, you've just got these canned animations, like you just go to robo mode sometimes. But in Baldur's Gate 3, it's always like cutscene quality work, and that's because they captured everything. And it's so impressive. It was really interesting learning about the limitations too. So when you've got your headgear on for full-on performance capture, obviously you can't block that camera. That camera is reading your face. And so let's say the camera is here, right? And I have to, I don't know, like in Resident Evil Village, Lady D puts on lipstick in a scene. So I can't do that because the camera would then be obscured by my hand, not picking up my lips anymore. And so, in the actual witness footage for Lady D, she's instead, like, here's the camera, and she puts her lipstick on like this. And so, in post, animators will then bring that hand closer, like that. But when capturing it, that's not possible. And so she has to just suspend that belief and pretend like she has that motion in there and hope that it lines up. But animators are still heroes in motion capture. They can fix so much. Obviously, you want to get it right the first time. Some things just aren't possible, though. And that's when you rely on actual animators. There's always going to be space for full-on motion capture, full-on animation. But the two are married together. You can't really have one without the other. But I just loved doing this. I want to do more of it. It was so fun to get to act with other people. It was so fun to just be trusted to try doing little stunts. I just had a great time doing it. I'd love to do more performance capture work. But I hope that I have taught you a little bit about like what it is. I'm sure some people have heard of this stuff. We're probably quite well versed in this stuff. But others out there maybe just don't really consider that the characters in their games are typically humans. It's not just people in a voice booth. A lot of the time, it's people on a stage. Just like theater, just like TV, just like film. And I would love this stuff to get recognized more. I'd love Game Award fields in, physical performance capture. Obviously, that stuff is much harder to qualify because we don't really see behind-the-scenes footage that much of these games. But I think a big reason Baldur's Gate 3 just took it in performers in 2023 was just because of how much work those actors put in. How many times in huge RPGs is every line of dialogue just properly performed on a stage? It's so impressive, and immense respect for everything those actors did. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you've learned something. If not, though, I hope you enjoyed it all the same. Thanks so much, guys. See you later. Bye.